Why, hello there. I hope you're doing well. Still enjoying the same coffee as my last video because I'm recording these back to back. Trying to get a little ahead of the recording process because I was a dumbass and packed my phone stand and recording stuff. So, I'm hoping to be able to get back to my regular schedule. So I really appreciate you coming back. This is a really delicious coffee. If you've never had Onyx, I really recommend it. It's a really good coffee roaster. Starting on the 1st, I'll be going through their advent calendar, which is always just pretty amazing. It comes in an awesome looking box, and the coffee is just really well done. So over the past couple weeks, while I was getting in the process of moving, I decided to dive into Dungeon Crawler Carl series. It took me about 1 to 2 weeks to read all of them, of the 7 books that are currently published. I found the books fairly easy to get through. They were pretty quick reads, and in the context of complicated fiction, they are definitely not complicated. They are relatively straightforward. Sure, there's some interesting things going on in them, but these books really were not generally emotionally challenging. Unlike other books, other series of this sort of length, like Malazan Book of the Fallen, or Songs of Ice and Fire, or Wheel of Time, this story is relatively straightforward. It's also, I think also partially because of the way that it's told, because it's told in first person, which limits how much you can actually learn about the broader universe, which I think is fine, and I think that's part of the specifics of this subgenre anyway. It's considered lit RPG or literature real playing time, and not real playing time, role playing game, because of some of the mechanics that are built into it, which in most fantasy series, there's always significant character development. I mean, that's always one of the biggest parts of it. And if you think about Wheel of Time, how Rand, spoilers, Rand starts out as a shepherd, learns a little bit of how to channeling, and then at one point he builds his own school and really focuses on how to learn. I mean, this is a big part of the entire series, like Harry Potter. It's also part of the Wizards of Earthsea. There's this, there's a genre where you have education or being at a wizarding school is part of it. In a lot of ways, you can kind of consider this as the next step, where instead of building your skills at a wizarding type school, you build your skills by going into dungeon crawl, and you have literal statistics where, like, the main character is cognitively aware that they are in some sort of game, and that they have knowledge of their stats, they have knowledge of levels, they have knowledge of character classes, hit points and mana and all that sort of stuff. And that is part of the mechanics of the world that they're in. So in this case, Carl has strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, charisma. There's a lot of hidden stats as well. And whenever Carl levels up, he's able to add points to these stats to improve his capabilities. And things like intelligence increases mana, while constitution increases his health. Carl gains strength really rapidly. It's kind of his main stat. And he constantly refers to his strength in terms of average number of men. And he's able to do things, like you could see the Thing do in the latest Fantastic Four movie, like pick up cars without a problem. And kind of similar to the Harry Potter series, this book represents a specific challenge, or each book represents a specific challenge. I mentioned this in the CFRK podcast, where my co-host was wearing a Mega Man shirt, where I kind of commented that every level in the dungeon is kind of like a Mega Man world, where there's a different mechanic or a different theme throughout it, and that drives the way that the characters have to interact with the dungeon. You can also think about it as like there's the water temple or the fire temple in Zelda games. While that's a full dungeon, these are just single floors. But I would almost argue that because of the scope of some of these floors, they're entire dungeons. Now, there's a single person doesn't have to go through the entire floor. They don't have to do everything. There's multiple different ways to get down to the floor below, and there's multiple different win criteria generally. But these are thousands of kilometers across the floor. It's not like Diablo where you have like, 3 or 4 floors that are a single theme, and then it changes to a different theme. Like, it is a single floor where it is, here's a gimmick. And so it's a similar design philosophy and the design aligns with the gimmick. So, there's a train level where they have to figure out how to use the trains to get around to get to a specific place. That interacting with trains has other consequences that you don't know about ahead of time. It causes additional challenges. And another one's a circus, where engaging with the circus causes a whole subplot to kick off. And so there's just the main story, and then because this is literally televised by aliens, well, I guess I'll set up the world a little bit since I haven't really done that. The place where this happens is Earth. It takes place whenever a group of aliens decide that we didn't meet some delivery criteria, that there was no way we could possibly have known about it, because the aliens came down during the Egyptian dynasties and said we had to deliver them some material. They couldn't do that because they weren't technologically advanced enough to be able to produce that material. So 2,000 some odd years, or 5,000 years later, the aliens came back, and anybody who was outside survived. Anybody who was inside was turned into material for the dungeon, and same with everybody's houses. And it just flattened everything down and created a hole into the earth. And about a half an hour after all that happened, there were a couple 100,000 or 1 million staircases opened, and people could go down into the dungeon. And as soon as you went in the dungeon, you learned that you were you were given a quest to go, enter this room, and you were basically attacked immediately by very low power mobs. And mobs are what people call monsters in most dungeon games. Like if you play Diablo, they're mobs. If they're massive multiplayer online role-playing games, which this essentially is, they're called mobs there because they can mob you. And this is being televised all across the galaxy, or across the known universe, or a part of the universe. And I think a lot of this, it's interesting because I think this book is a commentary as much on these parasocial relationships for YouTube creators or Twitch creators, and kind of generally it is a combination of esports, Twitch, and YouTube, and fan groups pop up around given crawlers or a group of crawlers. And I think it's pretty clear that Matt Dinniman, the author, isn't really a big fan of the culture that has sprung up around influencers or streamers, and really finds a lot of them toxic. And some of the humor is derived from that. One of the main characters is Princess Donut, the Queen Anne Chonk, or Donut, and one of her fan groups is donut hole, and it is a picture of Donut's asshole. And, you know, Donut doesn't like that, but she doesn't have any control over that. Which, by the way, Donut is a Persian cat, and is actually becomes sapient and a talking cat, and becomes actually more capable than Carl at the very beginning, and runs the party, which is a point of humor and tension throughout the entire series. And I really do think that Dinniman came up with some really, really great characters. And he kind of lets the cat, Donut, throughout, whenever the cat is engaging with Carl or with other people or with people she hasn't seen in a long time, it is like a cat who cares about you comes up to you and engages with you. Jump on your shoulder, they will come up and headbutt you. All that sort of stuff. That, you know, those things that, you know, the friendly cats that you know of. That is what Donut is, and it's kind of great the way he describes her, and has kept that throughout the entire series. Another one of the characters that was created in the same way was Prempitund, I think. He's a goat, and I find him hysterical. He is a very stubborn goat, and in some ways he's provided he's a comic relief, because his obstinance is something that people kind of like about the goat, despite itself. And because the goat was kind of a goat that screamed, whenever he gets emotional, he will literally scream in the face of Carl. And and so whenever he's hugging Carl, he'll scream in his ear. And it's great. They have a great relationship, and I think it's really, really funny because Carl doesn't understand it in a lot of ways either. And I think you could really argue that Pony, that's his nickname, is essentially an autistic character, and he has some trouble connecting with people, and the screaming is part of that. The way he talks to people is part of that, and I think it's great. Overall, I would say this series has a great sense of humor. It was really a joy to read the series and to keep reading it. And I think the other factor that kept me reading the book was that this was a book not about whether something would happen, it was more about how something would happen. You know, Carl was incredibly competent. You know, if you've played video games with friends who are really, really good at those games, where they can just, you know, you're in a party with them, and you're literally getting carried by them no matter what you do. Carl is that person in this world. He carries so many people, but he cares about the people, so he goes out of his way to make sure people survives. He's not antagonistic to other people, which I think is really endearing, and that makes you want to care about this character more. So in a lot of ways, I would say he's a character in the same vein as the main character of Martian or Project Hail Mary, where hyper competent people able to create plans that work, despite the fact that the world tries to do everything that it can to make his plans go awry, and that some of the people he's working with are working against them, both intentionally and unintentionally. So, like I said, it isn't interesting if Carl will complete a level. It's a given that you will. It's kind of the, how does Carl unravel the mystery, and then how does he solve the problems given his tools? Because he's a very blunt person. He punches, kicks, and he bombs things. And so, compared to other crawlers, he's a very straightforward person. But he has a huge heart, and really is driven by caring for people. Like, it is a major character challenge for him, his care for other people. And given that the bulk of humanity is killed in the split second as every building, including cars, collapsed, this means there's only a couple million that go into the dungeon, and there's only a couple million on the surface out of billions. And there's a literal score count of how many people are alive in the dungeon. And Carl is trying to do everything he can to keep those people alive, and it is heart touching, and it's hard whenever he fails. That's where most of the emotion comes from. And I think the other interesting thing is that you could compare this to Ready Player One in some ways, where there's a lot of pop culture references, and that's because the aliens are interested in Earth's culture, but it feels like it's being touched on in a way that's authentic, because the characters are talking about it, and there's also characters who are completely ignorant of it, like Gossip Girl. Carl doesn't know anything about it, but Donut and some of the aliens know about it, and then they talk about it, and Carl's like, whatever. And so it's interesting, because Carl also feels it's a duty of his to correct the record on these distortions of human culture, and that gets him in trouble a little bit whenever he's interviewing and all this sort of stuff. And I really like this series. The series reminds me of other books, but it doesn't make me wish I was reading that book, which is a really good reason to read this series. So I'm going to leave it here. I hope that you liked my book review. Have you read the series? Have you read any of Dungeon Crawler Carl? What do you think about the series? Did I miss any similarities or things that you would have wanted to call out in this? I really appreciate you coming back and watching this. Please comment, like, subscribe, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.